A warning to citizens of Ontario and Canada. Bill 67, which purports to be nothing but an anti-racist bill, is in fact the most pernicious and dangerous piece of legislation that any Canadian government has attempted to put forward. And I hope I'm not saying that lightly. It will make mandatory the subversion of the entire education system in Ontario, K-12 as well as colleges and universities, to the radically leftist doctrines known as critical theory, a thoroughly anti-Western ideology, both postmodern and Marxist in its derivation, based on the idea that all our extant institutions are racist, sexist, and discriminatory in their essence. Critical theorists assume that history is best understood as the war between identity groups, with one group always oppressing and all other groups always victimized and exploited. Critical theorists dismiss the idea of the sovereign, free individual, claiming that belief in such sovereignty and freedom does nothing but justify the oppression and exploitation of the marginalized. In keeping with that rejection, such theorists assume that human identity itself is best understood at the group level, with markers of race, sex, so-called gender, and sexual preference dominating. Critical theorists reject the presumption of individual innocence, absent proof of wrongdoing, assuming that membership in a group regarded as dominant and exploitative is sufficient to indicate the moral culpability of any given member of that group. Critical theorists define offense and harm as subjectively determined. Anyone who feels victimized by any statement made by anyone for any reason is fully justified in their feeling and claim of harm, regardless of the intent of the author of the statement, who is then to be deemed guilty of such victimization and denied even the opportunity for a reasonable defense. Bill 67 will mandate the creation of institutions of inquisition in every educational institution, to which anyone who has an opinion or undertakes an action that is perceived to violate the tenets of critical theory will be made necessarily subject to punishment. The author of this bill, MPP Laura May Lindo, NDP, Kitchener Centre, is former head of equity at Laurier University. It was Laura May Lindo who developed the policies that resulted in the circumstances that enveloped Lindsay Shepherd in 2017, which produced a scandal provincially, nationally, and internationally, left a permanent stain on Canadian universities, on the reputation of Canadian universities, and demolished that young woman's academic ambitions and future. The fact that the Ontario Conservative government has allowed and even encouraged such legislation to be put forward under their aegis, and then ignorant and careless enough to vote in support of it, is a woeful indication of both the perniciousness and deviance of the ideas that the legislation contains, and evidence of their own, the Conservatives' own stunning and continued inability to see the danger such doctrines present. It is much harder to actually deal with the fact of the sometimes unjust distribution of privileges and resources in a complex society than to kowtow to radicals who know how to viciously accuse, weaponize guilt, and claim through manipulative sloganeering the moral upper hand. But there's no excuse for the Conservatives and for the classical liberals, who also believe in the sovereignty of the individual, to trumpet their compassion for the oppressed by allowing authoritarian ideologues to gain their treacherous way. This bill, 67, threatens the integrity of all the systems that will educate all the young people in Ontario for decades to come. If it passes, the rest of the provinces in Canada will follow suit. The fact that this bill is already through second reading is inexcusable. Wake up, Canadians, before you do yourself and your children irreparable harm.